Accepting money from your married children is like sleeping in a bed that isn't yours. At first it feels comfortable, but sooner or later you wake up with a pain you can't quite place. Many do it with the best of intentions. It's just a little help, they say. But what begins as a loving gesture can turn into an invisible chain, made of silences, guilt, and glances that no longer feel the same. What you lose isn't always visible, but you feel it. Independence, dignity, mutual respect. In this video, I'm going to show you why accepting that money might be one of the decisions you regret the most. And I won't sugarcoat it, because what's at stake here isn't about finances. It's about your emotional freedom and inner peace. Here's a heads up. The final reason will hit hard because it speaks to a silent imbalance that once it takes root is almost impossible to undo. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. Stay with me until the end, because this reflection could change not only the way you relate to your children, but also the way you see yourself. Do you really believe someone can help you without tying you down somehow? Don't get me wrong. A child's love is deep, sincere, often selfless. But when that love gets mixed with money, the lines begin to blur, and what once was tenderness can turn into tension, emotional debt, or control disguised as generosity. You've just reached the first point of this video. Accepting their money turns you, without realizing it, into an emotional hostage. I've seen it with my own eyes. Parents who were once the backbone of their family end up walking on eggshells in their own homes, weighing every word so as not to upset the child who now supports them. It's a familiar scene. A father holding back his opinions to avoid conflict. A mother pretending to agree just to keep the favor of the one who pays for her groceries or wires her money each month. What seems like help is really a tightrope they walk day after day, afraid to fall into irrelevance. Do you know what happens when you accept money from a married child? You unknowingly give up a piece of your freedom, not because they demand it. Often, they don't even mention it, but your soul knows. Inside, you start reading between the lines, anticipating judgment, swallowing your disagreements to keep the peace. And that peace, my friend, no longer belongs to you. It's on loan. Stoic philosophy teaches that inner control is the only true source of freedom. Epictetus was a slave, yes, but he never let his soul be one. And you? What good is it to have your front door wide open if your mind is locked in the fear of upsetting the child who pays your gas bill? Let me tell you a story. It's not from a book or a famous philosopher. It's about a woman I met at a retreat outside of Puebla. Her name was Magdalena. She had been an elementary school teacher for over 30 years, a widow for 5, and had 2 married children. One of them sent her a fixed amount of money each month to help out. She was grateful, of course, but every time she wanted to make a decision, move houses, travel, even buy something that wasn't strictly necessary, she felt a silent pressure. What if my son doesn't think it's a good idea? What if he feels like I'm wasting his money? She started living based on what he might approve or not, as if every choice required an invisible green light. One day, in the middle of a conversation, she told me something I'll never forget. Gabriel, I realized I was never poor until I stopped feeling free. That day, she broke the cycle. Not because she resented her son's gesture, but because she understood that accepting ongoing help wasn't a solution. It was a way of postponing the real problem, her fear of standing on her own. Magdalena started cutting expenses, renting out a spare room, selling a few paintings she'd made in her youth. She wasn't rich, of course not, but she was back in charge of her life. And at her age, that was worth more than any monthly deposit. Here's the uncomfortable truth many don't want to face. Money from your children, even when it comes with smiles, even when it looks like love, always carries a thread. And that thread can end up tangling your soul, making you cautious, dependent, insecure. You might think I'm exaggerating, but tell me this, can you really speak as freely when you know that person could stop helping you tomorrow? The gospel speaks of giving as something that should come from the heart, not from duty or convenience. And you, with all the life you've lived, know that favors given too often can twist love, because there's no love that can survive constant debt. If you want to stay true to yourself with your values, your dignity intact, don't sell yourself for the sake of comfort. Sometimes the greatest act of love toward a child is saying, "Thank you, but no, I'm okay." Because when you do, you're not just freeing yourself, you're freeing them too. You take a weight off their shoulders, give them back their own path, and you make peace with yours. And believe me, there's nothing more valuable than looking your children in the eye and knowing you can say what you think, do what you want, and live how you choose, owing nothing to anyone but God and your own conscience. If the first step to reclaiming your freedom is refusing money that puts your soul in chains, the second is taking back the reins of your own life. Because what's the point of rejecting your children's help if you still end up asking for their permission to live? We've reached the second key point of this video. You lose the power to make decisions about your own life. Many believe financial dependence begins in a bank account, but in truth, it starts much earlier, in the mind. It's a subtle form of surrender that settles in like dust. You don't notice it at first, but over time, it covers everything. You stop making small decisions, like what to eat, when to go out, or what to buy, just to avoid upsetting anyone. Then come the bigger ones, whether you can move, start something new, or say no to a request. Suddenly, your life no longer fully belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius said we shouldn't worry so much about what others think, but about whether our actions are aligned with our nature. And your nature at this stage in life is not to be obedient or submissive, it's to be wise. You're not here to ask for permission. You're here to govern yourself with calm clarity. But that's impossible when someone else, however well-meaning, is holding the reins. Think about this. When your married children help you financially, how does that change the way you talk to them? Maybe you no longer speak your mind as freely. Maybe you soften your words. Maybe you stay quiet about their partner, their lifestyle, or even issues that directly affect you, and that slowly chips away at your inner power. Respect stops being mutual and becomes conditional. Because when you depend on someone, your voice loses weight. Even if they swear nothing has changed, you know it has, you're no longer able to decide with full freedom. And that has serious consequences, not just on your self-esteem, which begins to quietly erode, but also on your relationships. Because when you give up your decision-making power, you become someone who seeks approval, and that need creates tension. Maybe you become more irritable, more withdrawn, or more accommodating than you really are. You're no longer yourself. And eventually, that creates distance. No relationship can stay healthy when one person feels like they're walking on borrowed ground. I remember the story of Luis, a 72-year-old man who reached out to me through this channel. He wrote to say that ever since his daughter began helping him financially, he felt he'd lost his place in the family. He couldn't invite friends over without checking first, couldn't make decisions about his own home because, in his son-in-law's words, "We're the ones keeping all this going now." Luis hadn't just lost financial autonomy, he'd lost the natural respect he once had. In his email, he told me, "What hurts the most isn't the money. It's feeling like I no longer have the right to decide over my own life." And you know what? That sentence gets to the heart of it. When you let someone else decide for you, even with your permission, you give up a vital part of who you are. And the worst part is, you often don't realize it until it's too late. You get used to living halfway, silencing your desires, viewing old age as a waiting room instead of fertile ground for new decisions. God gave us free will not just to choose between right and wrong, but to take full responsibility for the direction of our lives. And that gift doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if you're 60, 70, or 80. If you're alive, you're still responsible for yourself. You can't hand over the keys to your life to anyone, not even to those you love the most. If you're making decisions today that don't reflect who you are, if you feel like you live more to please others than to be yourself, stop. Examine your life with the honesty of a wise soul and ask yourself, would I still be doing this if I weren't dependent on anyone? That one question can give you back more freedom than any amount of money ever could. Stoic philosophy isn't just about enduring pain. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your soul. And your soul, believe me, was made to lead your path, not to beg for validation. It's not too late. It's never too late. All you need is the courage to say once again, this life is mine, and I will live it on my own terms. If you've already realized that accepting money can strip you of respect, and that giving up decisions drags you into a life you no longer recognize as your own, then it's time to face an even deeper truth. You're placing a burden on your children that doesn't belong to them. We've reached the third point of this video, and this is where things can start to shift, if you have the courage to look beyond appearances. Because even if on the surface it seems like your children are helping you because they want to, more often than not, they're doing it out of an invisible mandate, out of inherited guilt, or the pressure of a society that tells them if they don't step up, they're bad children. But when you, with all your love, accept that money without question, you may be reinforcing that emotional burden, feeding a debt they never asked for, and one that will eventually impact their freedom, their marriage, their emotional well-being, and your relationship with them. What begins as an act of love can turn into a generational trap where you become the center of a responsibility that weighs them down, pulls them away from fully living their own lives, and even fills them with silent resentment. And you feel it. Because when someone helps you without joy, without peace, you can sense it. The strategy to break this cycle isn't to pretend to be strong or to act like you don't need anything. It's to embrace your stoic humility and reclaim your power to reinvent yourself. Find a symbolic source of income or personal value. It doesn't matter how small it is. It could be tutoring kids in the neighborhood, selling something made by your own hands, renting out an unused room, or offering your experience as a community mentor. Don't do it just for the money. Do it to send a message to your children and to the world. I still have value. I can still stand on my own. I can still build something. The logic is simple. The Stoics taught that virtue lies in living according to our nature, and the nature of an elder isn't passivity or emotional dependence. It's wisdom, creation, and composure. When your children see you striving, creating, standing tall, respect blooms. The weight they were carrying begins to lift, and in its place, admiration is born. Picture yourself as an old tree with deep roots. When that tree still gives shade and fruit, even if it doesn't grow like it once did, those who rest beneath its branches care for it out of love, not obligation. That's the difference. If you see yourself as a burden, others will too. But if you see yourself as a root, they will draw strength from your resilience. And now, if this reflection is stirring something within you, if you feel this message could help you or someone you love, I invite you to subscribe and hit the like button. That way, we can keep growing together, and you help me reach more people who need to hear this. Tell me in the comments what country you're listening from, and if this idea resonates with you, write, "I am not a burden, I am a root." I'd love to read your message. We still have crucial lessons ahead, and the final one will reveal a truth that could forever change how you relate to your children and to your own aging. Stay with me. If in the previous point we talked about how placing a burden on your children can fracture bonds and wear down the love that once flowed freely, now we need to turn our gaze inward to the way we often, without realizing it, sabotage our own dignity. Because after accepting financial help and letting others steer our decisions, it's easy to fall into a quiet but devastating trap. You put their relationship at risk. This is the fourth point of the video, and although at first it might seem unrelated, the truth is, this mistake shows up in the lives of many parents who, in their desire to receive support, ignore the delicate balance every couple must protect. It's a common mistake to think that the relationship you had with your child before they got married remains unchanged, that the bond is so strong everything else can adjust around it. But that's not the case. Once your child marries, you are no longer their priority. Their home, their partner, their new life demand a different kind of loyalty, a level of emotional maturity that we're not always ready to embrace. And if you depend on them, financially, emotionally, or through constant visits and favors, without meaning to, you start taking up space that is no longer solely yours. The partner feels it, interprets it, and even if it's not said out loud, a conflict is triggered that few are honest enough to admit. In many cases, your son or daughter's partner begins to feel like they're under constant surveillance, not because you openly criticize them, but because your very presence, funded by them, becomes a reminder that their decisions are under your influence, and when money is involved, the perception becomes even more fragile. We pay for everything, and now she wants to have a say in everything. Every time we argue, he runs to tell his mom because she's also paying for the groceries. That might not be true, but those thoughts take root quickly. And the saddest part? You're caught in the crossfire, unsure when or how the atmosphere changed. What was once a united family starts to crack under the weight of small silences. Visits become colder, conversations turn mechanical, the calls grow less frequent. And one day, without knowing exactly when it happened, you realize your presence no longer feels like a blessing. It's a diplomatically tolerated burden. Harmony is lost, not because you did something awful, but because your dependence has distorted the roles, the boundaries, and the freedom that every couple needs to grow without guilt. From a Stoic perspective, this is a form of internal disorder projected outward. When we fail to accept the natural course of life, the gradual letting go, the transformation of bonds, autonomy as a spiritual goal, we end up interfering in processes that are no longer ours to shape. That unconscious desire to remain at the center, to keep receiving, to keep influencing, even out of need, becomes an invisible barrier that pushes away those we love most. There's a spiritual dimension to this too. Because if you truly trust God, if you believe He walks with you through every stage of life, then you can also accept that your role as a parent has changed. You're not here to preserve an old version of your relationship, but to learn how to love from a different place, with respect, with healthy distance, with detachment. That's also love. And often, it's the most mature kind you can offer. Family harmony isn't built with money or silent sacrifice or constant presence. It's built with clear boundaries, emotional responsibility, and the wisdom not to take up space that no longer belongs to you. And if you feel like something has broken, if you've noticed your relationship with your child or their partner isn't what it used to be, maybe it's time to ask yourself a tough but necessary question. Am I, even unintentionally, stepping into a space that no longer belongs to me? The answer, however painful, might be the first step toward a new kind of relationship, one that's freer, more dignified, more peaceful. Because when you choose to step back with respect instead of clinging out of fear, harmony has a chance to return. And you, in turn, regain something far more precious than any financial help: your inner peace. We're now entering the fifth point of this video, and this is where many people realize, sometimes too late, just how much they've lost. You're feeding a dependency that slowly weakens your dignity. Dignity isn't just some lofty or philosophical concept. It's the deep sense that you own your life, that you can look in the mirror without feeling like you have to ask for permission to exist. And when you allow the money from your married children to become your main source of support, that dignity starts to erode little by little until it's barely a memory. Dependency has an anesthetic effect. At first, it feels like relief. Great, now I don't have to worry so much. But over time, every decision you don't make, every expense you avoid without checking first, every word you swallow to avoid conflict becomes another rope tying you to a borrowed existence. And that tether doesn't just steal your freedom, it fills you with frustration. Because you weren't born to be supported forever. You were born to move forward, to give, to create meaning, even as the years pile on. And you know this? That's why it hurts so much to live in a body that still breathes, while your spirit has already given up. The worst part is that dependency makes you invisible. When people no longer see you as someone who decides, who initiates, who leads, but rather as someone who waits, who needs, who endures, you lose authority. You lose real influence, and the hardest part, you lose respect. Not because your children are bad or because they want to belittle you, but because the dynamics of dependence change people. The one who gives feels superior, even if they never say it. The one who receives becomes quieter, more fragile, more irrelevant. And that imbalance seeps into the most intimate relationships. You start to notice your calls aren't a priority, your opinions carry less weight, your presence is more tolerated than welcomed. And you wonder, when did everything change? The answer is simple. It changed when you stopped fighting for your independence. I'm not here to offer you a shortcut. The path to reclaiming your dignity isn't easy. It's not instant. And yes, it hurts. It takes courage. Above all, it requires letting go of the victim mindset. Because as long as you believe there's nothing you can do, you'll stay stuck. But if you can look your situation in the eye and admit you've given up more than you wanted to, then you've already taken the first step. Stoic philosophy doesn't promise comfort, but it does promote inner freedom. And that freedom is built day by day through small but steady actions. Daring to say, I no longer want to depend, daring to seek solutions, however modest, that put you back in control of your life. Maybe that means cutting expenses. Maybe it means changing habits, selling something, offering a service, or sharing what you know with someone who needs it. It doesn't matter how small it seems. What matters is the direction, that you move toward reclaiming your sovereignty, that you can stand tall and say, I don't have much, but what I have is mine, and that's enough for me to feel whole again. Remember this, no one can truly respect you if you've stopped respecting yourself. But if you begin to honor your time, your choices, your value, others will see it too. And that inner transformation will be far more powerful than any external help. Because once you reclaim your dignity, you no longer need permission to be happy. If you've seen yourself in everything we've talked about so far, if you've felt firsthand the erosion of your autonomy, the slow fading of that respect you once took for granted, then you can't keep looking the other way. You've reached an age where there's no room left for soft excuses or polite self-deception. Because every day you accept help you don't truly need, every gesture of emotional dependence you reinforce takes you further from the version of yourself that was once strong, whole, and respected. And here we arrive at the sixth point of this video. You're confusing love with obligation. This is one of the most dangerous misunderstandings you can carry into later life. Picture this. Your son or daughter comes to visit, smiles, tells you they love you. But behind that visit, there's a calendar, a pending bank transfer, a quiet negotiation with their partner about whose turn it is to check in this week. What you interpret as affection may, for them, slowly be turning into a chore, a quiet emotional debt they carry with fatigue, and sometimes even guilt. You don't see it because you hold on to the kind gesture, the kind words, but deep down, love has been replaced by duty. And without meaning to, you feed it every time you accept without asking, every time you fail to question whether you really need that help or if you've just grown used to receiving it. Let me be blunt. True love doesn't need to be justified with money or favors. The love you're entitled to as a parent shouldn't be measured by how often they pay a bill or take you out to dinner. If you constantly need to prove that you deserve that love, what you're receiving isn't affection, it's social assistance dressed up as care. And that creates a deep, silent wound that, over time, turns into resentment. You believe you're loved, but you feel something's missing. They say they love you but feel trapped. And so the bond rots from the inside, not with shouting or arguments, but with long silences and hollow hugs. Stoic philosophy reminds us not to cling to what we can't control, and even less to what has already become distorted. If your children's love is tainted by guilt or duty, it's no longer pure. And you can't keep building your emotional life on a broken foundation. How many times have you mistaken attention for genuine commitment? How many times have you taken pity for affection? It's hard to say it out loud, but even harder to live it in silence. And if you don't ask yourself these questions now, you will later when it's too late, when you look back and realize you spent your last years waiting for gestures that didn't come from the heart, but from a family calendar full of forced obligations. You can stop that cycle, you can break it, but to do so, you have to stop confusing love with what you're given. Real love, the kind that uplifts instead of weighing you down, is expressed in freedom. When a child truly loves you, they want to see you strong, independent, joyful in your own right. They don't want to feel obligated to support you just to prove they're doing their part. And if you truly love them, you'll free them from that toxic sense of duty that doesn't belong to them. The question you should ask yourself every day isn't, do they love me? It's, would they still love me if they couldn't give me anything tomorrow? If the answer is uncertain, then it's not love. It's a transaction that's stealing your peace. And if you keep walking down that path without changing anything, the day will come when you won't know how to stop. Your identity will be tied to the help you receive, and when that help eventually stops, and it will, you'll feel alone, useless, abandoned. Not because they stopped loving you, but because you lost your way. And love, when it's rooted in obligation, silently crumbles over time. Don't let that happen. Don't keep building your relationships out of need. You still have time to restore authenticity in the way you connect with others, but only if you're willing to face the truth and act. If in the last chapter we uncovered the most damaging lie, confusing love with obligation, now we reach the deepest root, the one silently holding up the fragile structure you've been tolerating for years. This is the 7th point of the video, and it's a truth many don't dare to face. You disrupt the natural balance of the family. Because yes, even if it's hard to admit, when you accept money from your married children, you're reversing roles. You're disturbing the order that brings peace and clarity to every relationship. Like everything in life, the family needs boundaries. It needs healthy hierarchies. It needs each person to occupy the place that fits their stage in life. But when you, as a parent, choose to let yourself be supported financially by someone who now has their own life, their own home, their own partner, you're breaking that balance. And once it's broken, it's not easy to restore. This mistake slips in quietly, like a drop falling day after day until it wears down the stone. At first, it looks like help. Then it becomes routine. And in the end, it turns into an upside-down structure where you, who once were the guide, the support, the root, become someone who waits, who receives, who no longer leads or inspires. Your children, even if they never say it, start seeing you differently. You're no longer the role model. You're someone who needs direction. And even if you don't want to admit it, you feel it too. You find yourself responding cautiously, avoiding discomfort, adjusting so you won't seem demanding. When did you stop being the adult who brings order and become the elder who asks for permission? The answer lies in every favor you accepted without weighing its consequences, in every comfort you justified with phrases like, "I've worked enough," or "they can afford it." But here's the truth. No matter how old you are, your example still carries silent weight. And when that example is one of surrender, of complacency, of letting yourself be supported, what you're passing on isn't wisdom or humility, it's confusion. Your children no longer know whether to admire you or protect you. And that ambiguity slowly erodes the emotional foundation of the family. Because a household where roles are reversed without awareness becomes a field of unspoken tension, guilt, and burdens no one asked for. If you've made it this far, it's because your dignity still matters to you, your peace, your place in the world. So take a hard look at what you've built. Do you feel respected? Do you feel free? Can you make decisions without fearing that they'll be offended or withdraw their support? If the answer is no, then it's time to change course. But don't do it by assigning blame or waiting for them to change. Do it by accepting that it was you who allowed this order to unravel, you who lowered your guard, who shifted your place without measuring the cost. And only you can reclaim it, with steadiness, with clarity, with the dignity that's yours. This isn't a condemnation, it's a call to return to center, to restore things to where they belong, to rebuild family harmony through mutual respect, not forced help, to stop seeing money as salvation and start seeing it for what it is, a tool that, when misused, can break what's most sacred, the order of love. Because love, when it's in order, sets you free, but when it's out of order, it binds you. You can start fixing things today, but only if you're willing to stop making excuses and begin looking with clear eyes at what you've helped twist. You still have time to give your family what it truly needs, your inner strength, not your dependence, your example, not your resignation, your dignified presence, not your constant need. Because when you're at peace with yourself, everyone else starts to find their place too. And that changes everything. If by now you've recognized that the family's balance has been thrown off, that love has been tainted by guilt, and that your dignity has been worn down by ongoing dependence, then there's no more time to waste. Change doesn't begin with good intentions or motivational phrases. It begins with a concrete decision. We've reached the 8th point of this video, and it's time to face it head-on. You're sabotaging their role as parents and as a couple. Maybe no one's ever said it to you in these words, but what you allow today, they will carry tomorrow. Because if your children are raising their own kids while still supporting you, they're not living their stage of life as they should. They're caught in a loop where you, without meaning to, have become an emotional burden that's holding them back from becoming fully formed adults. The concrete action is this: stop and take a step back. Evaluate, honestly and without excuses, everything you can cover on your own. Make a cut, a realistic inventory. What expenses could you take on if you reorganized your life? What space can you free up to regain income, independence, and the ability to make your own choices? It can be small, but it has to be yours. Do it now, not tomorrow, not after you talk to them, not when you feel stronger, because waiting only makes the problem grow. And every day you continue accepting what you don't truly need is another day you weaken them and drift further from yourself. Now, action alone isn't enough. Action without the right mindset is like a candle in the wind. You need a deep shift in perspective. Stop seeing yourself as someone who deserves to be supported just because you've given everything in life. That may be true, but it's not a reason to live without independence. Yes, you gave. But now it's time to give the most important thing of all, an example. Your role at this stage is not to be taken care of. It's to show how to live with resilience, humility, and inner strength. If your children are raising children of their own, they need to know you're okay, not just physically, but emotionally steady, spiritually grounded, and financially stable. And you give them that gift when you stop competing for attention or resources and begin walking beside them with wisdom. I know it's hard, I know it hurts, but this isn't a sentence, it's your opportunity, because the most powerful thing you can offer them now isn't a list of needs. It's a clear vision of what it looks like to grow old with dignity, and that's built day by day through real choices, not by waiting for them to have more, not by demanding repayment for what you once gave, but by showing that you can still stand on your own, and more importantly, that you don't want to place a burden on them that takes them away from their own journey. Look in the mirror tonight and ask yourself, what can I stop asking for? What can I start doing for myself again? What space do I need to release so they can grow without guilt? There's no perfect answer, but there is one undeniable truth. No one can move forward while carrying a burden that isn't theirs to bear. And if you choose to release them, you free yourself too, because you realize you don't need as much as you thought. You just needed to remember what you're made of. And once you do, everything changes. Because you change, and so do they. If you've made it this far, if you've followed each one of these truths as they peeled away, one by one, the blindfolds of self-deception, then you already know that change is not comfortable. It never is. Breaking a pattern that's lasted for years, decades even, doesn't happen through good intentions or inspiring speeches. It happens through firm decisions. And right there, on the edge of real transformation, appears the final and most seductive trap. This is the 9th point of the video, and perhaps the hardest one to admit. You cling to a role that no longer belongs to you. Because it's not just about accepting a place that's no longer yours. It's that you hold on to it, defend it with excuses, justify it with phrases you've repeated so many times. You no longer know if they're truths or just comfort. I've worked my whole life. I've earned this. They can help me. It's no big deal for them. It's how they stay connected to me. At least I know they remember. Sound familiar? I've heard them 1,000 times, and they all come from the same place: fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being useful, fear of accepting that you're no longer the center of the family you helped build. But here's what you don't see. Those phrases aren't shields, they're chains. They keep you tied to a past identity, to a version of yourself that no longer fits the reality. And as long as you keep repeating them, you'll keep justifying the unjustifiable, living in dependence on people who now need space, order, and a life of their own. Some will say, I have no other choice. But that's rarely true. What you lack isn't options, it's courage. Because yes, it's easier to keep receiving than to rethink your entire life. It's more comfortable to wait for a transfer than to find new ways to stand on your own. It's more soothing to believe you still hold a central role than to accept that this stage of life calls for a different kind of presence. Less protagonist, more sage, less visible, more essential. And that, my friend, takes a transformation few are willing to begin, But you're here, and if you've listened all the way to this point, it's because deep down you know you can't go on like this. Family balance isn't held together by nostalgia or past privileges. It's held together by truth, and the truth is this. If you continue accepting money from your married children, you are disrupting that balance at its core. You're inserting yourself into a cycle that needs to evolve, without your demands, without manipulative silences, without dependence dressed up as connection. And you're not doing it out of malice, you're doing it because you don't know what else to do. But that can change. Today, if you're willing to let go of the excuses, if you're willing to recognize that real love doesn't need financial contracts or obligatory visits, that the only way to truly be respected is to take your rightful place with dignity, with boundaries, with a presence that doesn't intrude, doesn't demand, doesn't destabilize. Because yes, money might look like help, but if it doesn't come with freedom, it's not help. It's a trap. And you weren't born to live trapped by what others give you. You were born to carve your own path, even now, even at this age. Time doesn't justify surrender. Age doesn't excuse cowardice. The past doesn't give you the right to stall someone else's present. And if you want to reclaim your peace, your respect, your worth, stop justifying what you already know no longer makes sense. Be quiet, reflect, and act. Because continuing as you are is no longer an option. If you've made it this far, you're not like the rest. You're one of the few who've had the courage to look at your life with open eyes. No filters, no excuses. You've listened to each of these truths without covering your ears, without running toward easy comfort, without hiding behind worn-out phrases. And that, at your age, is an act of bravery. Because many would rather keep lying to themselves than face what they've allowed. But you're still here. And that means you still have within you the spark it takes to change whatever needs to be changed. Not to please anyone, not to win approval, but to reclaim the peace that only comes when you live with coherence and dignity. Now you stand at a crossroads. There's no one left to blame. There's no more time to waste. Either you keep going as you are, trapped in patterns that wear down your spirit and your connection to those you love, or you take control, make the changes, cut the invisible strings, and rebuild your place with strength, respect, and inner resolve. I want you to leave a comment with a phrase that confirms your decision. Write, "I reclaim my power," and let me know which country you're watching from. That way I'll know who among you is ready to do more than just watch a video, who's ready to transform their life. Because what we're doing here isn't entertainment, it's a call. A reminder that you can still be the architect of your own destiny. I'm Gabriel, and this channel, the Stoic Garden, exists for that very reason. To walk with those who are done living in fear, in guilt, or with a numbed soul. We don't sugarcoat life here. We face it because we know that only those who dare to look it in the eye can live with truth. I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community. One that doesn't give up, doesn't play the victim, and doesn't wait to be rescued. We're the ones who choose responsibility, calm, and self-respect as our path. Share this video with someone who needs it. Maybe they won't thank you today, but if even one part of this message reaches them, they might begin to see their reality differently, and that is already a miracle. Stick around now for one of the videos on screen. The conversation doesn't end here. We keep walking this road together. Because as long as there's truth, there will always be a chance to begin again.